Okay, so once we have these things set up, let's talk about what makes a good looking skin. Because I just did that and it looks fine, and don't call it done right here. I've seen so many models that just apply things and call it done because it looks a bit like skin because it has subsurface on. It's not an ideal way. Alright, so let's talk about how we're going to make this material. So we have our material constructed. Now we're going to focus on look deving the skin to make it look like a good skin. Alright, so there are three main elements that I think makes a believable skin, which are specular, then we have subsurface scattering and global illumination. These things are, I'm talking in terms of rendering side of things because our maps and material has already been done. Right now, the only thing we want to focus on is how it's being rendered and how the light is interacting with it. All right. So to recap it again, specular, subsurface scattering, and global illumination. Let's start with specular. So specular consists both of your gloss map and specular map, and it involves a bit of back and forth with the sliders that we have. So by default, our roughness map is doing this, and our specular map combined with it is giving us this look. So this is not something that we want. We might want a bit of a secondary intensity. So this one I might be able to show you guys much more. So this one is controlling our specular. So okay, I can make it a bit more easier to show you guys. So this is our, so I got rid of my gloss map. This is just a demo. I don't want to get rid of this one, just to demonstrate you guys what I mean by secondary specular. So this one is a primary spec. This is the default GGX. So what's happening with this one, we have a highlight and that highlight kind of gets blurred away. So that's how GGX reflection work. All of these things are basically the technical thing, how things are being reflected on and other mumbo jumbos. But if I add a secondary spec and make it more glossy, you see on top of the thing that we had before, we are getting one more highlight right here. See that? And that's quite sharp. That's what we want. We want a base highlight, which is this one. It has our, we want the base specular to be like this, which has a highlight which fades off and has a gradient. Then we want another reflection to happen, which is doing this. Oh, there it is. So see that? That's adding this highlight on top of that. Why is it important? Because as I mentioned, skin has a secondary specular lobe. It's not something I came up with. It's something those science people found out, science plus artistic people found out, and I'm just using their knowledge so far they gained. Okay, so this happens because you get those oil on top of your skin. Skin is not a dead thing, right? It's not an insulator or a metal. It's an insulator if I go technical, but it cannot be categorized with those guys. So skin has one extra layer of this. That's why we are adding that. All right, that was a long talk, but let's get back to building our things. So let's make it white again. Let's make it, let's just keep it at 0.45 now. I might want to change that sometime. So for our specular, make it 0.027. That's the default one we are starting with. And I'm going to change my scatter a slight bit less because I want to see some of the information right now. Okay, let's go back to our secondary specular. Now what we want is a slight bit of a specular highlight, but a bit more glossy. So what I'm looking for is something like this. These are something you have to eyeball with your references. Right now I'm just eyeballing it through the experience I have with dealing with skin. Alright, so I guess this is a nice highlight which fades off, so I like that. Let's keep it right here right now. For my gloss, let's bring back our map. And this works fine. I might want to decrease the specular a bit less. there will be a lot of back and forth while you guys do it and while I do it as well. Right now I'm just calling it done in 1 or 2 minutes to save time, but this back and forth kind of goes on for hours sometimes. So don't be worried if you're not getting a good result in one go. It happens. If you come look at it again in the next day, you'll figure out maybe the spec is not right or something. Just change it. Just don't commit to something in one go, because it is stopping you to get the best result as you can. Okay, so we have our specular done. Next thing we want to talk about is subsurface. What makes skin skin? All right, so right now the subsurface that we have is quite fine. So I start at 1 for realistic faces as a starting point. Instead of having this tone, I like to make it more saturated. So what it does, it brings back some of my details and it makes my skin look more alive. So you can see right here, it looks all blurred out, but when I go saturated, oh, nope, there it is. When I go saturated, it brings back some of my information. I don't want to go that saturated as well, so I'm moving a bit left, somewhere around here. One more thing we want to notice is this shadow. So this subsurface is giving us a transition from shadow to the skin, and right here. So we want just a slight bit of a blur, maybe a millimeter or 2 in real life scale. But as I said, 1 works quite fine as a starting point. We can always move it back and forth a little bit. So I'm going to keep it someplace here, or maybe a little bit more, maybe 1.2. Yeah, this works fine. One more place where reference is quite important, so don't forget about it. But since I have a single light, I can see how everything is working. I can also make my sky completely black, so I can figure out if my subsurface is right or not. So I feel it's quite nice, so I'm going to keep it there. There it is. Next up, we have translucency. So subsurface in Marmoset is built by 3 things: scatter and translucency and fuzz. We might want to neglect fuzz for now, but we will talk about it. So scatter defines how in and how should I say that? Scatter defines how much subsurface is happening, and translucency defines how much light is passing through your model. So let's say if I place a light in the back and my translucency is at 0 right now, but if I scale it up, it's letting that light travel from back and to front a lot more. And if I change the depth, you guys can see that light is coming all the way from there. But let's get rid of this guy now. So that's what it does. First, basically fakes it through our Fresnel like this. So let's go back to our scatter. So as I mentioned, scatter around some place like this should be a bit fine. And I guess I should stop myself from doing that back and forth a lot, but you guys get the point. So translucency adds up to how much light is being transferred from one place, not transferred, how much light is passing through the face. So if I increase this, and if I increase the scatter, we can see what it's doing. But we don't want this to happen everywhere, because not every part of the skin or face is empty, like ear, nose, and lips and eyelids. So places where we have bones directly underneath it are not going to allow light to pass from it. You can actually see that as a demonstration when you have a light facing directly back of your ear kind of glows up. That means light is passing right from it. So we have already made a translucency map that is going to define where our translucency will happen and where it won't. Oh, I plugged it in the fuzz map. Let's get rid of that. That will be translucency, no fuzz. So right now the translucency is only happening around the nose, the ears, and the places we painted on. So that's the technical talk. What we want as an artist for the translucency to do is get rid of these. So this is what I look for most. So this shadow below the nose, and if you have a single light pointing down, you can notice that on yourself in a dark room, if you have a single light pointing from top to bottom, some of the light gonna pass from your nose, not giving this complete pitch black look. To add that, I have a transparency map, and this is one of the things that's important to me in a face, to not have a nose completely dark with a single point light. All right, you can notice how it's giving us a bit more believable look. I don't want to have it too much or too less, so I'm just playing with my sliders to figure out the value that I need. Again, one more thing that involves reference and a lot of back and forth. Okay, so that's cover our scatter, that covers our transparency. The default color works fine, so I don't change it that much. The fuzz adds up a fuzz. You see that? Just a slight bit. I'm going to keep it maybe at 0.1, not more than that, someplace around here. This kind of gives you a fuzzy look around the face, which obviously is faking the fuzz from the face. All right, we have this. Let me give it a bit more fill light because it was getting a bit dead to me. So there it is. We have our thing going on. All right, I think it went a bit too glossy. So instead of going back to substance, right now I'm just going to use a flat value to make things a little bit quicker for me. Okay, so that's it for decrease this. Okay, so that covers our scattering. Next up we have GI, but before we cover GI, we are going to cover one more thing that we have down here. So you remember we added a cavity map. We added a cavity map in our albedo as well, but now we're going to use it in our specular. So this brings me back to the specular thing that the face has. So cavities, the pores on a face has a pretty big AO in a micro level. So right now, since our pores are reflecting back light, they kind of look a bit inaccurate. So that's why we added a cavity map. Let me show you what it does. Let's make our AO 1 right now. It's doing its job, so let it be. If I increase the diffuse, it's adding the cavity map in my color information. I don't want it. I don't want to add a diffuse through this guy, and it only adds black, so there's no point adding black. That's why we added a bit of a color in our actual diffuse. You can make it more intense if you feel like it. The specular cavity is the one that we need. So if I increase the specular cavity, you can see it's blocking all the lights in our pores, and that's quite important. All right, let me show you guys more what it's doing. So this is our pores, zero cavity, more cavity. It's making our pores look more like pores and also bringing back the pore information that we lost because of subsurface. All right, so that's why we have a cavity map in our shader. Last thing that we want to talk about is GI. So it's not GI per se, but this is the term I use to define the bounce back of light in skin. So what happens once you have a light pointed in a skin, what's happening is light is coming in and it's bouncing back from areas like cheeks, nose, and bouncing back to each other, getting rid of the dark areas like these ones or these ones, making it more look like skin. So in a CGI model, this thing usually happens. Light does not bounce back as you want, but we fake that through light sometimes and the GI in Marmoset. So in Unreal, we don't have a good GI. So what I do, I have a light pointing from bottom, getting rid of these guys. So for an example, this is not we're going to do in Marmoset, but to show you guys, just notice this one versus this look gives it more of a skin look. We have our skin looking skin already because the shadows, these dark shadows, are getting rid of it. So we are going to fake that through GI. See that? Looks like skin. Looks like CG skin. Looks like skin, CG skin, skin. All right, you get the point. So to get rid of that, we have this GI guy right here. It's adding a bit of it. It's a sweet area you have to find where it's not too emissive looking, but not too dead looking as well. Somewhere right here. It also helps with the translucency that we have going on. So that's great. So GI off, GI on, GI off, GI on. Alright, just that slight bit of hint gives your skin more of a believable look and less CGI look. GI does get quite heavy on GPUs, so I would recommend keep it for the last, because your scene is going to be like it's going to be super slow. Okay, so we have our render. It's working fine. I'm going to make it 2:1 to see how it's going. So 2:1 actually scales down your viewport twice and compress it down to 1:1. It's like anti-aliasing, but in a different way. So it's basically making, let's say, your monitor 2K and it's showing that 2K output in a 1K monitor, for example, in my case. So that's why it gets heavy. I don't recommend it, but that's how our final result is going to look like. So sometimes I like to have that in the viewport. Okay, I might increase my gloss again because I feel it's getting less. Increase it a slight bit more. Increase it a slight bit more. Oh wait, my bad. I just wanted to decrease the roughness. Cool, cool, cool. Alright, so we have our skin coming along. So we went over the specular, we went over the subsurface, we went over the GI, and the last thing that the skin has left is micro details. So micro details are something we are adding from this guys, and what we want the micro detail to do is break up our spec. So if you see these spec right now are being broken up in a certain level through our normal map, but skin has a lot more information on top of it. So we are just using a random noise to break up those spec into smaller chunks, and I can control the intensity from here. So let me show you guys a better example why we are adding it. So right here we don't have any kind of breakup right now, so we don't have any breakup. Then we added the breakup. See that? The micro level kind of gives our skin more believable look. And just changing the tile, maybe somewhere around here and something like that. I might change my translucency again. Again, the back and forth happens, so don't be scared or worried that if you're not getting a skin in one go. It's quite natural. I spent like a whole week just doing this thing, slider, changing lights, adding lights, and getting rid of it. But I found this lighting setup which works quite good for me in my experience, and sometimes I use it to present as well, something like this. I'm gonna get rid of my translucency again, maybe the depth. Okay, something like this. This is a play thing, the look dev stage, where you have to like do a lot of back and forth. All right, to end this guy, I want to show you guys one more thing that makes our skin look like skin. So this is the last part, last element that comes from the lights of your engine. So this is something that our material or shader won't fake. It does fake a little bit, but the last touch comes from the lighting of our real-time engine. On an offline engine like V-Ray or something, it's gonna do it itself. But in a engine like Marmoset and Unreal, we involve lights to help us sell our skin. So what I mean by that is, if I pick my main light, it has a width. If I decrease it, you can see I have a sharper shadow, but I do want a bit blurrier shadow, because if you notice, your skin has a softer shadow compared to a metal or any other part. So this softer shadows help us get our skin look like skin again. So not again, but it helps sell our skin. So let me show you guys this in a better way. So this is without zero. This is with more blurred one. Okay, so these are the main element to keep in mind while look deving your skin. Even in Unreal Engine, the rules gonna be the same, but this is what I look for while texturing my skin. And one last thing that I might have forgot is our gloss map. Right now, we wanna have our horizon smoothing to be 0. So what it's doing, it's making our pores, not pores, our normal map from the Fresnel more intense or less intense. So we don't want the pores to have any reflection on them. So you want to have a horizon smoothing to be 0. Let me get rid of these guys, and maybe this guy as well. But in general, that's how we construct our skin. That's what we look out for. And I guess, okay, so one thing I should have mentioned is when you blur this guy, it blurs your highlight as well, not just the shadow. And once you do that, you have to go back to your specular and do this back and forth again. All right, so like I changed it. Now I have to go to my specular and make changes to it till my highlights are a bit back or in a nice place. Okay, get used to this back and forth. It sometimes gets annoying, but this is what it is, and that's how you do it. All right, to recap again, what I look for in a skin are 3 major components, which are specular. So the specular should have a secondary lobe and the pores should not have any specular. The second one is subsurface. It should have a nice red transition from shadow of the skin to the skin. Then we have translucency. The nose, the eyelids, and the lips should not have darker shadow. It should pass some light through it. Then we have fuzz. You can add a little bit of fuzz here and there. Nothing big deal. Then the third component is the GI. GI in terms of the bounce back of light from different part of skin to another, getting rid of the dark zones. So we fake the GI by adding a light from below or using the actual GI in Marmoset. The light from below is a trick I use in Unreal Engine because the GI right now is not that great there. Then the last element, the fourth one, which is a bit unofficial for the skin, but more towards the lighting side of a rendering engine to fake a better skin, is softer shadows through your light. All right. So those are the key things to keep in mind while making your skin. And hope, I kinda want to change my specular again. Somewhere around here. Okay. Yep. So I can go back and do that back and forth again, and just wanted to show you guys it's gonna happen. So don't be afraid, take your time, take a whole day, get some coffee or whatever helps you work better. Go find good references of skin. If you can find skin in a lighting setup, that's better. Find out what they do and how they are doing it and change that through these sliders. I showed you the tool. I showed you what I look out for, but now it's your time to develop those eyes to find out what to look for. All right, I'm going to see you guys in the next one now.